Welcome in, everyone. Today's deep dive is going to be, it's going to be interesting. We're talking about clouds.
Clouds, huh?
Yeah, clouds. But not just, the science-y stuff. We've got a whole mix here. Myths, religion, UFOs, you name it.
Oh, wow. That's quite the range.
Right. It's amazing how these fluffy things in the sky have captivated people for, forever, basically.
I mean, yeah, you look up, they're always there, changing, shifting. It's no wonder people have come up with all sorts of stories about them.
Exactly. So let's start way back with the myths. Pretty much every ancient culture has gods and stories tied to the clouds.
Oh, absolutely. You think about the Greeks, right? Zeus, king of the gods, hanging out up on Mount Olympus, always shrouded in clouds.
Yeah, like it's his own little VIP area.
Haha, right. Like, you mere mortals can't handle this level of power. It's a real power move, if you ask me.
Totally. And it's not just the Greeks. The Hindus have Indra, god of rain and storms, wielding lightning bolts.
Right, and up north, the Norse, they've got the Bifrost, that rainbow bridge to the gods. Some think it was inspired by the northern lights, those crazy skylights.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. So we see that from way back when people were trying to make sense of the world, and these powerful forces of nature like storms and rain, they kind of got personified up in the clouds.
Totally. And these stories, they weren't just for fun. They were tied into how people lived, what they believed.
Absolutely. Like in the Bible, right? Noah's Ark, the flood, all that rain, and then you've got God speaking from the clouds. Super dramatic.
Oh, yeah. Talk about authority. That image, those heavens opening up, a voice booming down, it's been used in art for centuries. Michelangelo, even in movies today, that big epic feel.
For sure. And it's not just Christianity. The Qur'an, too, talks about Allah's messages coming down from the clouds. So this is a pretty universal thing, this idea that clouds, they can connect us to something bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And what's super interesting is that people didn't just see the gods themselves in the clouds. Sometimes the clouds themselves were like messages or omens.
Oh, yeah, right. Like fortune telling, but with clouds.
Exactly. The Romans and Greeks, before a big battle, they'd check the clouds, try to figure out if the gods were on their side. Was it a good day to fight or not?
Makes sense. I mean, they're always changing, so you could probably interpret them in all sorts of ways.
Oh, totally. They even had these special priests, augurs, who were like the cloud experts, interpreting what those shapes meant. It was serious business.
And in the Bible, there's that pillar of cloud guiding the Israelites through the desert. That's like a literal cloud GPS.
Uh-huh, right. Divine guidance up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, some cultures still have these beliefs. The Navajo Nation, they have sacred clouds that represent different spiritual realms.
Wow, so that connection, it's still there for some people. That's pretty amazing.
It is, isn't it? In a world with all this technology and stuff, that sense of mystery, it hasn't completely vanished.
Speaking of mystery, let's talk UFOs. I mean, come on, who hasn't looked at a weird cloud and thought, is that a spaceship?
I know, right? Our brains just love to jump to conclusions. But some clouds, they do make it easy, especially lenticular clouds, those smooth lens-shaped ones.
Yeah, those totally look like classic flying saucers, especially if they're hovering over a mountain.
Right. It's prime UFO spotting territory. But even beyond those misidentified clouds, there are some UFO sightings tied to like really weird cloud stuff, and it's hard to tell what's what.
Oh, like what? Give me an example.
Well, there's that miracle of the sun thing back in 1917. It was in Portugal, Fatima, I think. Thousands of people saw this crazy stuff happening with the sun.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. Some people thought it was a miracle. Others blamed mass hysteria or maybe some weird weather event.
Exactly. Even 100 years later, nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah.
And there were some strange cloud formations reported too, so it all gets mixed up.
Makes it even more mysterious. And sometimes Mother Nature just throws us these curveballs that even scientists can't fully explain. Like, what about ball lightning?
Oh, that one's wild.
Yeah.
Imagine seeing a glowing ball of light just floating around during a thunderstorm. Talk about spooky.
Right. You'd think you were in a sci-fi movie or something.
Totally. And then there's St. Elmo's fire. That eerie blue glow you sometimes see around pointed objects during storms. It's electrical, but if you didn't know that, you'd probably freak out.
Yeah, it's like nature's own special effects show. It reminds you that we don't have all the answers, even with all our fancy science.
For sure. And speaking of how our minds work, let's talk about that thing we all do. Looking for shapes in clouds. It's a kid's game, but there's actually something deeper going on.
Oh yeah, we see a bunny, a dragon, whatever. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines.
Exactly. It's called pareidolia. Our brains are wired to find patterns, even if they're not really there. Like, it probably helped our ancestors survive, spotting a predator, hiding in the bushes, even if it was just a shadow.
Right, better safe than sorry, right? So we got that from them, and now we see faces in toast and spaceships in clouds.
Haha, exactly. And clouds are like the perfect canvas for that because they're always changing, so fluid and kind of mysterious. It's like a giant Rorschach test in the sky.
Totally. We project our own imaginations onto them, which explains why we see everything up there, from dragons to Elvis.
Haha, oh yeah, Elvis in the clouds. But it is cool to think that it's not just a silly game. It's how our brains try to make sense of the world, finding meaning in randomness.
Deep stuff. And that brings us to art. I mean, poets, painters, filmmakers, they've all been inspired by clouds.
Oh, absolutely. You've got Wordsworth's poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. He's talking about daffodils, but the clouds set the whole mood, this peaceful, contemplative feeling.
Right, and those landscape painters like John Constable, he was obsessed with clouds. He'd capture all those subtle changes in the sky, how they affected the light and the whole scene.
Yeah, for him, clouds weren't just background. They were like the main character. And then there's animation. Think of those Studio Ghibli films.
Oh yeah, Castle in the Sky, all those fantastical clouds, the airships flying around. It's like our childhood dreams up there on the screen.
Totally. Ghibli films, they just capture that sense of wonder and possibility, like anything could be hiding up in those clouds.
Makes you want to jump on an airship and explore yourself. But it's also important to think about how, like, the media we consume, it shapes how we see clouds and mysteries, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. These days, with the internet and social media, we see so many images, videos, stories. It's hard to know what's real and what's fake.
So true. It's like a double-edged sword. We have more info than ever, but it's also harder to filter out the noise.
Exactly. So it kind of makes you wonder, how do we balance our fascination with the mysterious side of clouds with the actual science, how they form and all that?
Right. We know that clouds are water vapor condensing in the atmosphere, and science explains why they look different, how they move. But that doesn't take away the feeling you get when you see an amazing sunset with crazy clouds or a powerful storm coming in.
You're right. Science gives us the facts, but it doesn't have to ruin the awe, the emotional connection.
And some clouds are so cool, even knowing the science, they're still amazing.
Totally. Like Momentous clouds, those pouch-like ones that hang down from storm clouds. They look kind of menacing, like something out of an alien movie.
I know. And we know it's just sinking air and ice crystals, but they're still awesome to look at.
Right. And undulatus asperatus clouds with those crazy wave-like patterns. Like the sky is having a meltdown.
They're pretty rare, right?
Yeah. And scientists are still figuring them out, but they definitely challenge what we think a cloud should look like. Even with scientific names, they still have that mystery.
And then there's climate change, which is messing with clouds too. New patterns, weird formations, that adds a whole other layer to things.
It's true. Global warming, changing weather patterns. It's like we're literally reshaping the sky, and we're just starting to understand what that means.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, all these different ways people have seen clouds throughout history. Now I want to dive into some specific stories, those mysterious cloud events you mentioned earlier.
Sounds good to me. We've talked about the miracle of the sun, but there's plenty more to unpack. Let's start with the Phoenix Lights. It was 1997. Thousands of people in Arizona saw this huge V-shaped formation of lights in the sky. Silent, just moving across the night.
Oh yeah, that one's famous. Some of that was a giant aircraft, others thought alien spaceships.
Right. But then some people reported seeing a V-shaped cloud earlier that evening. So maybe what they saw later were flares or military aircraft. It's still a big debate.
Even after all the investigations, it's still a mystery. Pretty fascinating how these things, even without clear answers, can really capture people's imaginations.
I know, right? Shows you how much we crave meaning, patterns, even when they might not be there.
So, speaking of unexplained events, what about those divine clouds in Kashmir back in 2000?
Oh yeah, that one was wild. People saw religious figures, symbols, all sorts of things appearing in the clouds, big religious fervor, people traveling from all over to see them.
Shows how much culture and belief shape how we see the world. What one person might see as just a weird cloud, another person sees a message from God.
Absolutely. I think it's a great example of how even with all our knowledge, there's still room for mystery and wonder, especially when you're looking at something as vast and ever-changing as the sky.
So true. Before we jump into more of those specific cloud stories, why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we'll explore how technology might change our relationship with clouds in the future. Virtual reality clouds, AI analyzing weather patterns. Could get pretty wild.
Welcome back, everyone. It's kind of funny, thinking about how the word cloud has changed. It used to be we looked up and saw those white puffy things. Now the cloud is where we keep all our stuff, data, photos, everything. It's true. It's like this invisible world, all that information just floating around up there. Kind of a weird thought when you think about it too much.
Right. And with all the technology we have now, virtual reality and all that, could we actually create our own cloud experiences?
Oh, absolutely. I can totally see that happening. Imagine putting on a VR headset and suddenly you're flying through a thunderstorm.
Or designing your own clouds, sculpting them in the sky.
Yeah. Or imagine a virtual art installation where the clouds react to music, changing colors, shapes.
That'd be awesome. And what about AI? Could it analyze all the weather data and make super realistic cloud simulations?
AI is already being used for that kind of stuff, modeling weather patterns.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not hard to imagine one day having these virtual cloud environments that feel totally real. You could step into a VR world and feel the wind, the mist, everything.
Wow, that'd be amazing. But even without all that futuristic stuff, clouds are still popping up in art and pop culture all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Think about vaporwave, that aesthetic with the pastel colors, those dreamy landscapes. Clouds are a big part of that.
Yeah, totally. It's all very chill, nostalgic vibes. Those kind of surreal, perfect clouds just fit that mood perfectly.
Right. They add to that feeling of being disconnected from reality, lost in a dream. And you see clouds everywhere, in paintings, music videos, fashion. They're just so adaptable.
Yeah, I guess it's because they're kind of blank slates in a way. We can project whatever we want onto them, which kind of brings us back to that question we had before. Will we ever fully understand clouds, or will there always be some mystery to them?
That's a tough one. Science is always advancing, explaining more and more stuff, but I think there will always be things we don't fully grasp. And I think that's okay,
I agree. It's good to have some mystery. It keeps us curious.
Exactly. It keeps us exploring, asking questions, looking up at the sky and wondering. And clouds, they've been inspiring us for, forever. I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
No, I don't either. The beauty of a sunset, the power of a storm, just watching clouds drift by on a sunny day, those are experiences that go beyond what science can explain.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So for everyone listening, what's stuck with you so far? We've covered a lot of ground, from ancient myths to UFOs to the future of technology. Has anything changed how you think about clouds?
Yeah, maybe you'll start noticing the clouds more in your own life. Maybe you'll see a shape that gives you an idea for a story, or you'll witness a crazy storm and realize just how powerful nature is.
Maybe you'll just appreciate the beauty of the sky in a new way. That's cool too. I mean, we've talked about how clouds have been interpreted throughout history, how they inspire art, and how they still fascinate us, even with all the technology we have now. But now let's dig into some specific cases, stories that show how clouds can make us wonder, make us question what we think we know.
We've talked about clouds inspiring all these myths and, even UFO stories. But I wonder, does that kind of thinking, seeing symbols and stuff in clouds, does that still have a place today? I mean, we know so much more about weather now.
It's a good question. We have all this tech, satellites tracking storms, forecasting rain. But even with all that, there's still something about clouds that goes beyond just the science.
Right, we can explain how a thunderstorm forms, but seeing it in person, that raw power, it's still pretty amazing.
Exactly. And that feeling, that awe, it can connect us to something bigger, whether it's, spiritual or just a sense of how vast nature is. Clouds can do that, even now.
So even if we don't look for messages in the clouds literally, they can still make us think, reflect, remind us there's still mystery out there.
Absolutely. And I think in a world that's so busy, so tech-focused, being able to just look up at a cloud, appreciate its beauty, that can be really grounding.
Yeah, it's like a break from all the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe those moments of quiet contemplation, looking at the sky, maybe that's where new ideas come from, a spark of creativity, or just a sense of peace.
That's a great way to put it. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from ancient myths to UFOs to the future of tech, all thanks to the sources you brought.
Yeah, we've looked at how different cultures see clouds, how they inspire artists, and how they still fascinate us, even in this tech-driven world.
We've seen how these things, these clouds, they've shaped history, beliefs, even how we understand the universe. And we've encouraged everyone listening to look up, observe, and maybe even create their own cloud stories.
Because the sky is this constantly changing canvas, just waiting to be explored. And it reminds us that even though we think we've figured so much out, there are still mysteries to uncover, beauty to appreciate.
So next time you're outside, take a minute, look up, and let your imagination run wild with those shapes and patterns.
You never know what you'll see. Maybe a familiar face, a mythical creature, or maybe just a sign that it's time for an adventure. But even if you just see clouds, remember, they're a sign of nature's power and beauty. A reminder that there's always more to see, more to learn, more to explore.
And that's our deep dive into the world of clouds. We hope you enjoyed it and that maybe you'll see those fluffy things in a new light now.
Until next time, keep looking up, keep exploring, and keep those questions coming.
And most importantly, never stop being curious.